Awesome.
All
Well,
right.
welcome. Hi, Chase. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm just so glad you can talk to us a little bit about our taxes on our properties and how we can do something to get them lowered.
Absolutely. So I am with Home Tax Shield. We'll talk a little bit about this is just an informational session, by the way. So excited to just share a little bit about the protesting process. You know, almost 90% of folks in Texas do nothing, Crystal. Can you believe that? Don't protest their taxes at all. And so, with our incredible appreciation, not only in Central Texas, but just in general, right, and across the country, there's an opportunity to try to limit your tax liability. And really, what we're after in general, and what you should be after too, is just getting your taxes to where they're a fair valuation. I think that's important. So you may have seen in the news, you may have voted for it, you may not have voted for it. It all depends. But the homestead exemption, if this is your primary home and you live in that property, the homestead exemption in Texas went from 40,000 as an exemption to 100,000. So that applies to us this year. And what's exciting about that is you should at least see if your taxes stayed, or your valuation rather stayed the same, your appraisal, you should see a reduction in your tax liability this year. So that's an exciting thing for us too, at least as Texans.
I'm excited about that for sure. Anything to help us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just to help us with affordability and obviously we always want to save money. So here's really what the tax protesting process looks like this year. The deadline in Travis County is May 15th. So it's very important that you remember that date, because if you miss that date, you miss your opportunity. And every homeowner has one opportunity per tax year to protest their taxes. So if you protest your taxes and you don't like the outcome, you don't have another opportunity. If you don't protest your taxes and you miss the deadline, you don't have an opportunity. So your opportunity is now until May 15th. And that we're going to talk about how you can do this on your own. We're going to talk about how you can do this in hiring a company. This is really, again, informational. So just know that's the deadline. You would have to go on to the appraisal district website in whatever county you're in. We're going to talk about Travis County because we're in Austin, Texas, right? So with that said, go on the website, file the protest, or hire a company before that date and make sure that they file the protest on your behalf. From there, it is really about gathering data, scheduling a time with the county, and making sure that you put everything together. So all of this data is actually public. So all the data that we use as a company to go in and fight taxes, most of it is public. Not all of it, but most of it. There's two fights, Crystal, and this is the interesting thing. A lot of people think, well, I need to call my agent because I need sales comps. That can be a possible way, right? But we also know as real estate professionals that sharing sold data information through the MLS is actually not what we're supposed to share, because we're in a non-disclosure state, right? Where Texas doesn't have to tell you what your neighbor bought their home for. And so sales comps are one fight, but another fight in Texas is actually what they call the equity fight. So, being a real estate professional, Crystal, you're always thinking about, well, how much equity do I have in a house? Or how much equity does that seller or buyer have in that home, right? That's a common thought process, at least. This is different. This isn't as far as things being equitable from a taxation perspective. And so, for instance, I bought my house, I'm making this up, but I bought my house in 1970 and I'm on the tax records for 200,000. Crystal, you bought the house across the street from me. And again, we're making this up. We're not neighbors, but we're making this up. You bought the house across the street for $1 million last year, right? So now you're paying taxes on $1 million while your neighbor across the street's paying taxes on 200,000. Again, this is a pretty drastic comparison, but just this does exist in many neighborhoods where you have somebody that's lived there for a very long time, and you have somebody that's come in and bought another property over the last couple of years that's valued at a lot higher valuation, that would be considered inequitable, right? So the taxable values for what people are paying are inequitable. And for sake of just this conversation, we'll say that both our houses are 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 1,500 square feet on a 0.3 acre lot. Again, making up some metrics here, but just to keep things the same, you can see that the valuations at mine being 200,000 and Crystal's being $1 million, just it's not even similar. And so thinking about that, that's one of the ways that preparing data and going and using that data honestly against the county, it's their own data, using it against them to say, why am I valued at this, but my neighbor is valued at X? That's an opportunity. But also pulling data in a given geographical area is really what you typically have to do to really stretch outside of just your direct neighbors to find these inequitable data opportunities. And that's what's been successful over the last couple of years, even as the sales prices of homes, right, have gone up. And we know over the last couple of years that the prices have realigned a little bit. But it hasn't been just, the sky has not fallen. It's just realigned slightly. And so with that said, even when the prices were going up 20% per year, we could still lower taxes based off of the equity fight. Now, here's the other thing to keep in mind on the same vein. Homeowner, or the taxing entity rather, is a couple of years behind. So when they're looking at your taxes of what you're going to pay in 2024, they're looking in the rearview mirror. And so you have to just remember that much like even insurance companies, right? The premium you're paying on insurance is based off what their losses were the year prior and maybe the year prior to that. So same with your taxing entity as well. And we're trying to use current data, right? And they're looking in the rearview mirror. So just something to be aware of as you go through this process.
Right, so the comps that we sometimes give to them are not going to be comps that they will even use because they are actually wanting comps from the end of last year in most cases.
That's right. And also as well, sometimes I've seen homeowners take in comps, Crystal, that don't substantiate a reduction. They actually substantiate an increase. And so really being careful about what you take in is the key. So the way a company like Home Tax Shield would look at this is we're going to look at both type of comparisons. We're going to look at not only what you're being taxed on and what you're paying on, but we're going to look at your appraised value as well. So for instance, let me give you another example. Your appraised value might be $1 million, but you're only being taxed on 700,000. So with the homestead exemption, that may be what's keeping you from having those two values the same. If this is a rental property and you don't live in it, you're going to see those numbers be more closely aligned. What you're paying taxes on and what the appraised value is, because you don't have exemptions on a investment or rental property. But let's go back to a property that you do have exemptions on, like a homestead or over 65 or whatever the exemptions could be. You're going to typically see a variance between the appraised value versus what you're actually paying taxes on. I'll hear some people say, well, my appraised value is high, but what I'm paying taxes on is low. Okay, so should I protest? The answer, and this doesn't have to do with the fact that I'm in the business, it really has to do with the fact that the answer is yes, and I'll tell you why. Even if we aren't able to lower your tax liability of what you're actually paying every year, we can attempt to bring down the appraised value. And what that helps to do, and again, this is not what your home would sell for, right? This is just the appraised value with the appraisal district. They will 10% you, which is the cap they can increase you every year when you have a homestead exemption, every year from that 700 in the example I'm giving until they get to $1 million. So if you can bring that appraised value down to where it really you believe it should be, then you are lessening the potential of where you could go in the future. if we can, and our goal really is to try to bring down your tax liability, right? So that's another example. I can share one more as to try to keep this as simple as I possibly can. So let's use you have a $500,000 house, okay, and you have a homestead exemption on it. That's $100,000 reduction, like we talked about, right? And what you pay taxes on. So that's 400,000. You protest your taxes. We get your tax, what you're actually paying taxes on, down to 450. So we got it down 10%. That's pretty solid. Next year, when they go to 10% you again, now you're at 450 instead of 500. So now you're going to be at 495, right? If they 10% you. If we attempt to then go back and try to lower them again, my point is that every time you lower them, you're actually compounding the opportunity, especially when you do this year after year. So my best recommendation for people is stay consistent, fight your taxes, and even if you think your valuation is fair, I still recommend protesting it. I've done this every year. I think I'm one of the lowest values on my street. And this, again, doesn't have anything to do with that I'm part of a tax protest company. It just has to do with that I've been consistent and I've had the opportunity to lower my taxes that way. So that's my biggest recommendation for everybody here.
That is some great advice. And yes, I agree. I think everybody needs to protest every time because they are trying as hard as they can to get your value up so they can charge you more tax. And we don't like that. So we need to get it down. So let me ask you this. If somebody wanted you to help them with their taxes and help them to fight so that maybe they're very busy, they don't have time to deal with it, you can help take that off of their plate. How would they reach out to you? What's the best way?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways that they can reach out. And, we partner with amazing folks like yourself, Crystal. And so you have actually set up a partner page that they can go to, and that is very easy. It's just hometaxshield.com/partners with an S /Crystal-Kilpatrick. And I know she's going to send this to everybody too, so you have it. But if you just need generic information, go to hometaxshield.com. And you can go there and you can see a lot of information. But you sign up through Crystal's link, you're going to get a 50% discount on the first year. So it's only $30 for us to file the protest and a tax specialist to fight the taxes on your behalf. We're actually going to send somebody into the county, prepare all the data grids, do all of that. But you'll get that at 50% off. So it'll be $15. And that's just, again, to check and make sure that your taxes are fair, right? When we are successful on the back end, so we're going to file the protest on May 15th. We're going to communicate with you that it's been filed. We're going to go immediately into protest season for the next 6 to 8 weeks, depends on the timeline, but somewhere around that time frame. We're then going to communicate with you around sometime beginning of July. And if we can earlier, we certainly will, but sometime in July. And we're going to tell you what we've been able to accomplish on your property. So whatever that is, you're not going to be billed immediately for that success. And I'll talk to you about what that fee structure is on the success side. That's actually going to be due in October, November, when your ordinary tax bill is going to be due. Anyway, when we are successful, it's a 30% success fee minus any exemptions that you have. For instance, so go back to that example I gave of the $500,000 property. You have a homestead exemption on it. We lower it to 450, but your exemption takes you to 400, right? That situation, you don't have a success fee that you would pay to us. You would only be out the $15, which meant that we checked your taxes. We got you lowered to where you start next year to 450. That's a successful protest, by the way. It's just that we feel like it's fair. And again, we're all about being fair here to everybody involved. We didn't actually lower how much you're paying. We lowered the valuation of where they're going to start next year. So the other scenario is if we lowered say in that situation, or even take a investment property, you're going to pay 30% of whatever the savings is to Home Tax Shield. So we save you $100, you're going to pay us 30. Save you $1,000, you're going to pay us 300, just to break it down for easy math.
Okay, that sounds very reasonable and fair and like a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for letting me be here. This has been so fun to chat. And if anybody has any questions from this, again, go to hometaxshield.com. There's a chat feature on there. We're all readily available to help, and just look forward to connecting with you guys. So, and happy protesting.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here and your time. And yes, happy protesting to everyone.
Mhm.
Thank you. Awesome.